There's a place where time moves differently, where the sea remembers every ship that ever sailed, and where one keeper of light discovered that endings are simply doors we haven't learned to open yet. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the last lamp that was ever lit in the lighthouse at the edge of forever, and the secret that the stars kept for 50 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's begin at the beginning, or perhaps at the ending that became a beginning. Welcome to Whispered Peace. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend these quiet moments here, in this space carved out from the noise of the world. If you're new here, you've discovered a sanctuary, a place where stories are told not to excite, but to soothe, not to stimulate, but to settle. My voice is here to guide you gently toward the rest you deserve. Before we begin our journey tonight, if you find comfort in these words, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd like this video, subscribe to Whispered Peace, and share it with anyone who struggles to find stillness at the end of the day. Your comments mean the world to us too. Tell me what brings you peace, what helps you sleep, what stories your heart needs to hear. I read every single message. Now, let's prepare for sleep together. Find the most comfortable position you can. Adjust your pillow one last time. Let your body become heavy, as if roots are growing from your spine down into the earth beneath you. Take a breath in, hold it gently, and release it completely, along with everything you've carried today. Good. You're exactly where you need to be. Tonight's story begins in 1873, on a rocky coast where the Atlantic meets the sky. The lighthouse at the edge of forever stood on a promontory so narrow that from certain angles it seemed to float between sea and sky, tethered to the world by only the thinnest thread of stone. For 50 years, Elias Thorne had climbed its 173 steps every evening as the sun descended, carrying his oil can and matches, his weathered hands knowing every crack in the iron railing without needing to look. But tonight, this particular Tuesday in September, when the air held that specific quality of light that comes only in early autumn, tonight would be his last ascent. Tomorrow, a young man named Christopher would arrive from the mainland, eager and bright-eyed, ready to take up the post. The Maritime Authority had decided that 50 years was long enough for any one person to tend a light, even though Elias had never missed a single evening. Not through storms that rattled the lighthouse like a toy, not through the influenza that had swept the coast 10 years prior, not through the grief that had settled into his bones when his wife Sarah passed away on a quiet morning much like this one. The lighthouse had been Sarah's idea, actually. "Marry me," she'd said 30 years ago, standing on this very promontory with wind whipping her dark hair around her face. "And I'll live with you at the edge of the world. We'll be the ones who make sure nobody gets lost at sea." She had kept that promise until the day her heart simply stopped, as quietly and unexpectedly as a candle flame going out. Elias paused on the 47th step. He always counted, even after all these years, and placed his hand on the cool stone wall. Through the narrow window, he could see the sun beginning its descent, painting the water in shades of copper and gold. A fishing boat was making its way back to harbour, its sails full of the evening wind. "They'll be home before dark," Elias murmured to himself, or perhaps to Sarah, who he often felt walking beside him in this tower. No need to hurry with the lamp. But he did hurry, in the way that habit makes us hurry even when there's no rush. His legs, though 73 years old, knew these steps like a prayer, and he climbed steadily, his breathing matching the rhythm of the waves far below. 112 steps, 147, 173. At the top, the lamp room awaited him, its great Fresnel lens catching the dying sunlight and fracturing it into 1,000 small rainbows that danced across the curved walls. This lens had been installed the year Elias was born, and he liked to think they had aged together, both of them growing clearer and more focused with time, both of them knowing their purpose down to their very bones. He set down his oil can with a soft metallic sound and walked to the eastern window, looking out across the darkening expanse of ocean. From here, on a clear night, you could see 7 miles in every direction, 7 miles of water, 7 miles of stars, 7 miles of the space between earth and heaven. "Last time," he said softly, "last time I'll fill this reservoir. Last time I'll trim this wick. Last time I'll strike this match." But even as he said it, he didn't feel the sadness he expected. Instead, there was something else, a curious sense of anticipation, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elias moved through his routine with the precision of 50 years' practice. He checked the oil level, cleaned a smudge from the lens with his soft cloth, trimmed the wick to exactly the right length. His hands moved automatically, leaving his mind free to wander through memories. He remembered the first night he'd lit this lamp, 23 years old, and terrified of making a mistake, of failing the ships that depended on his light. His predecessor, old Captain Morrison, had stood beside him that night, steady hand on his shoulder. "The secret," Morrison had said, "is to remember that you're not fighting the darkness. You're offering an invitation to the light." Elias had never forgotten those words. For 50 years, he hadn't fought darkness. He'd simply invited light every single evening, without fail. The sun touched the horizon now, beginning its final descent. Elias struck his match, watched it flare to life, and touched it to the wick. The flame caught, flickered, then grew steady and strong. He adjusted the lens, set the clockwork mechanism that would rotate it through the night, and watched the first beam sweep out across the darkening water. 1 rotation, 2, 3. The beam moved like a slow, gentle hand, reaching out across miles of ocean, touching the crests of waves, announcing to the world, "You are not alone. I am watching. There is a way home." Elias settled into his chair, the same wooden chair that had been here since Captain Morrison's time, worn smooth by decades of sitting and watching, and prepared for his last vigil. But the night, as it turned out, had other plans. The first star appeared exactly where stars always appeared in September, just above the eastern horizon, bright and steady. Venus, the evening star, the ancient wanderer. Elias nodded to it like an old friend. "Good evening," he said, as he always did. "Clear night ahead, I think." The star seemed to brighten slightly, though that might have been his imagination. But then the second star appeared, and the third, and the fourth, and they appeared not where stars should appear, not in their fixed positions in the great wheel of constellations, but closer, much closer. Elias leaned forward in his chair, his weathered hand gripping the armrest. The stars were descending, drifting down from their positions in the sky like snow, like ash, like seeds carried on some celestial wind. They fell slowly, dreamily, until they hovered just beyond his windows, so close He could have reached out and touched them, if not for the glass between. His breath caught in his throat. In 50 years of night watches, through storms and calms, through northern lights and meteor showers, through every astronomical wonder the sky had offered, he had never seen anything like this. "Sarah," he whispered, half expecting her to answer, to explain this impossible thing. But there was only silence, and the soft whirring of the lamp's clockwork, and the distant sound of waves against rock. The stars arranged themselves around the lamp room, perhaps 30 or 40 of them, each one pulsing with its own rhythm of light. Some were golden, some silver, some had a faint blue tinge like glacier ice. They hovered and swayed slightly, as if breathing, as if alive. And then, in a way that wasn't quite sound and wasn't quite silence, they spoke. It wasn't words, exactly. It was more like understanding, like knowledge appearing directly in his mind, the way you suddenly remember something you'd forgotten, or the way you simply know when someone you love is thinking of you. "We have been watching," the stars seemed to say. "Every night for 50 years, we have been watching." Elias found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. I don't understand. Stars they don't come down. They don't speak. We do not come down often. The understanding flowed into him. Only for those who have truly seen us. Only for those whose light has reached us in return. My light. Elias looked at his lamp, still rotating faithfully, its beam cutting through the darkness. "It's just a lighthouse, just oil and fire and lens. It doesn't reach the stars, doesn't it?" And suddenly, Elias understood, or began to understand. For 50 years, he had sent light into the darkness, not knowing where it ended, not knowing what it touched. He had assumed his beam traveled 7 miles and then faded into nothing. But light doesn't stop at 7 miles. Light doesn't stop at all. It travels and travels and travels until it reaches something that can see it. The stars had been seeing his light for 50 years. Every night, they told him, your faithfulness called to ours. Every night you lit your lamp, we lit ours in return. Did you think we were just burning accidentally? Did you think we were just distant fires with no purpose? I never thought about it, Elias admitted. I suppose I assumed you just were. The way mountains are, or oceans. We are the lighthouse keepers of eternity, the stars said. And there was something like gentle amusement in the understanding. We tend the lights that mark the safe passages through the darkness between worlds. We guide travelers far stranger than any ship, and we recognize our own kind when we see them. Elias felt tears on his cheeks, though he hadn't realized he was crying. I'm just one man with one lamp on one small rock. How could I be anything like you? Size is not what matters, the stars replied. Faithfulness is what matters. Showing up night after night, whether anyone notices or not. Whether anyone thanks you or not. Whether you feel important or not. That is what makes a light keeper. That is what makes the darkness less dark. One of the stars, a particularly bright one with a golden glow, drifted closer to the window. We came tonight, it said, because this is your last night. We came to thank you and to tell you a secret. A secret? Elias leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly. Every light is connected, the star told him. Your light, our light, the light in every firefly and candle and campfire and lamp, the light in every kind word, every act of faithfulness, every moment someone chooses to illuminate rather than obscure. It's all one light, really, expressing itself through countless flames. When you lit your lamp each night, you weren't just warning ships away from rocks. You were participating in the great work of keeping the universe from collapsing into total darkness. But tomorrow I won't be here, Elias said, and he heard the grief in his own voice. Tomorrow someone else will light the lamp, and I'll just be, what, an old man with nothing to do. Oh, Elias, the stars seemed to sigh, and the sound was infinitely compassionate. Light keepers never retire. They only change posts. I don't understand. You will, the stars promised. Before dawn, you will understand everything. The stars remained hovering around the lamp room as the night deepened, and Elias sat in his chair, feeling as if he'd stepped outside of time into some space between moments. His lamp continued its faithful rotation, beam sweeping, darkness returning, beam sweeping again. And in each return of the light, he began to see things he hadn't noticed before. In the beam's glow, memories appeared like photographs hung in midair. But they weren't his memories, or at least not only his memories. He saw a clipper ship from 1875, caught in a storm, the captain desperately searching the horizon for any sign of land. He watched as the ship listed dangerously to port, waves crashing over its deck, crew clinging to the rigging. And then, there, his light appeared through the rain, steady and sure, and the captain corrected course, steering away from the rocks that would have torn his ship apart. 43 souls aboard that vessel, all of whom sailed into harbor the next morning, wet and exhausted, but alive. Elias gasped. I remember that storm. I didn't know. I never knew if anyone was out there in it. You saved them, the stars said. You never knew, but you saved them. Another memory formed in the light. A fishing boat from 1889. 3 brothers returning from their nets. Fog so thick they couldn't see their own bow. Lost, disoriented, nearly out of fuel. They'd given up hope when suddenly, a beam of light cutting through the fog. They'd followed it home, like the wise men following their star, and their wives had wept with relief on the dock. I was just doing my job, Elias protested, but his voice was thick with emotion. Yes, the stars agreed. You were just doing your job, and your job saved lives. Do you understand how rare that is, to have a job that keeps people alive? More memories came, dozens of them, hundreds perhaps. Ships small and large, pleasure boats and merchant vessels, navy frigates and fishing dinghies. Some he vaguely remembered seeing, distant lights on dark water. Most he'd never known about at all. They had passed safely because he'd been faithful to his post, night after night after night. But then the memories shifted, and Elias saw something that confused him. He saw a young woman standing on the cliff path below the lighthouse 27 years ago, on a November night. She was crying, staring out at the black water, and Elias watched as she climbed up onto the rocks, standing at the very edge where the waves crashed and sprayed. He remembered this. He remembered seeing her from his lamp room, remembered feeling alarmed, remembered coming down all 173 steps faster than he'd ever descended and calling out to her. I remember her, Elias whispered. She was going to jump. I talked to her for 2 hours, convinced her to come inside, made her tea, let her sleep in the keeper's cottage. By morning, she said she'd changed her mind. I never saw her again. Look, the stars said, and the memory continued. He watched the woman leave the lighthouse at dawn, and then the memory jumped forward. He saw her 5 years later, married, laughing. 10 years later, holding a baby. 15 years later, teaching a classroom full of children. 20 years later, white-haired and happy, surrounded by grandchildren. She lived, Elias breathed. She lived and had a whole life. Because of your light, the stars said. She was lost in darkness that night, and your light called her back. Not just the lamp's light, your light, the light of your presence, your care, your willingness to leave your post and talk to a stranger in her darkest hour. Elias put his face in his hands and wept. He had thought of that night occasionally over the years, had wondered what happened to that sad young woman, but he'd never known that she'd gone on to live such a full life. I didn't do anything special, he said through his tears. I just stayed. I just listened. Yes, the stars agreed, and their light seemed to glow brighter. You just stayed. You just listened. You just kept showing up. Do you think that's common? Do you think everyone does that? Most people cannot bear to stay present in someone else's darkness. Most people turn away. You turned toward. That is the essence of being a lightkeeper. The memories continued to flow, but now they weren't memories of rescues or saves. They were smaller moments. A ship's captain's daughter who'd waved to the lighthouse every time they passed for 15 years because seeing the light had made her feel safe. A young boy who'd visited the lighthouse once with his father and had decided to become a sailor because Elias had taken the time to show him how the lamp worked. A poet who'd written verses about the faithful light that never sleeps and had given hope to thousands of readers who never knew he was writing about this lighthouse. Elias's lighthouse. Your faithfulness rippled outward, the stars explained, in ways you could never see from your position. That is the nature of light. It touches things you cannot imagine, in places you will never go, in times after you are gone. The woman you saved, her granddaughter became a doctor. She will save hundreds of lives. Her grandson will invent something that helps even more. The ripples go on and on, Elias, forever. I had no idea, Elias whispered. All these years, I thought I was just maintaining a lamp. You were maintaining hope, the stars corrected gently. You were maintaining the possibility of safe passage. You were maintaining the promise that someone was watching, someone cared, someone would be there in the darkness. That is no small thing. That is perhaps the greatest thing. Elias looked at his hands, weathered and spotted with age, trembling slightly. These hands had filled oil cans, trimmed wicks, polished glass, turned mechanical wheels. These ordinary hands had apparently touched so many lives. Why are you showing me this? He asked the stars. Why tonight? Because, they answered, you need to know your worth before you understand what comes next. You need to know that your life mattered, that you mattered, not because of anything extraordinary, but because you were faithful to something essential. You kept the light burning. You stayed at your post. You did not abandon your duty even when it was lonely, even when no one was watching, even when you thought it didn't matter. And now, Elias asked, now that I'm leaving, now that someone else will take over, now, the stars said, we offer you a choice. The brightest star, the one that glowed with golden light, drifted even closer to the window until Elias could see his reflection in its radiance. He looked so old in that light, so worn, but also dignified somehow, seasoned, complete. Elias Thorne, the star said, and hearing his full name spoken by starlight, made him shiver. You have been a faithful keeper of light on earth. We came tonight to offer you a new post, should you wish to accept it. A new post? Elias's heart beat faster. But I'm old. I'm finished. Tomorrow I'm meant to retire to the cottage in the village, to spend my days sitting and remembering. That is one path, the star agreed. A perfectly good path, and one many would choose. You could live out your remaining years in peace and comfort, tending a small garden, perhaps, walking on the beach. It would be a gentle ending, and you would be content. But, Elias prompted, because he could hear the unspoken alternative hanging in the air. But, the star continued, you could choose a different ending, or rather, a different beginning. The other stars seemed to press closer, their light intensifying, and Elias felt his breath catch. You could become one of us, the golden star said simply. You could take your place among the eternal light keepers. You could tend one of the great lamps in the darkness between worlds. Elias stared, his mind struggling to comprehend what was being offered. Become a star? That's not possible. I'm a man, not whatever you are. We were all something else first, the star said, and now Elias could hear a smile in the understanding. Every star you see in the night sky was once a faithful keeper of light somewhere, in some form. Some were human like you. Some were other beings from other worlds. Because, oh yes, Elias, there are other worlds, countless other worlds, and all of them need light in their darkness. Some were creatures you would call angels. Some were artificial intelligences that chose compassion. Some were beings you have no names for. But all of us, every single one, earned our place by doing what you did, showing up faithfully to keep the darkness at bay. I don't believe it, Elias whispered. But even as he said it, he wondered if he was lying. Because looking at these stars, feeling their presence, some deep part of him recognized truth when he heard it. You don't have to believe, the star said kindly. You only have to choose. Stay on earth and rest, which you have earned, or come with us and continue your work on a grander scale. Either choice is honored, either choice is complete. But what would I do as a star? What you have always done, the star answered. Keep watch, tend your light, guide those who are lost. The scale is different. You would be guiding ships that sail between dimensions, helping souls find their way from one life to the next, marking safe passage through cosmic storms. But the essence is the same. Faithfulness, presence, the steady maintenance of hope in the darkness. Elias stood slowly, his joints protesting, and walked to the window. The beam of his lighthouse lamp swept past, and in that moment of illumination, he looked out at the vast ocean, then up at the vast sky, and tried to imagine himself up there among those distant fires. Would I remember? He asked quietly. Would I remember Sarah, this lighthouse, my life? You would remember everything, the golden star assured him. Memory is light, Elias. Memory is how the past illuminates the present. You would carry every moment of your life with you, and it would inform how you keep your new light. Sarah especially. She would be part of your glow, forever. At the mention of Sarah's name, Elias felt something break open in his chest, some carefully maintained dam of grief that he'd built over the years. Tears spilled down his weathered cheeks. I miss her, he said simply. Every day, I miss her so much. We know, the stars said gently, all of them speaking together now. We have watched you grieve. We have seen how you poured your grief into your faithfulness, how you transformed loss into light. That is alchemy, Elias. that is magic of the truest kind. Will I, if I become a star, will I see her again someday? The golden star pulsed softly. We cannot tell you everything about what comes after, but we can tell you this. No light is ever truly separated from another light. You are already connected to Sarah in ways deeper than physical presence. If you become a star, you will be able to feel that connection more clearly. And someday, when her journey is complete, she will have her own choice to make. Elias closed his eyes and let himself imagine it. Sarah as a star, bright and beautiful and eternal, her light dancing with his across the darkness. The thought was so lovely it hurt. How long would I be a star? He asked. Forever. Until you choose otherwise, the star said. Nothing is permanent except the choice to love, the choice to serve, the choice to illuminate. Some stars keep their posts for billions of years. Some eventually choose to return to physical form, to be born again somewhere, sometime, to learn new lessons. The universe is vast and strange and full of possibilities you cannot imagine from here. But right now, in this moment, the question is simple. Do you wish to continue your work? Elias turned back to his lamp, watching it rotate with its familiar mechanical precision. He thought about young Christopher arriving tomorrow, eager to take up the post. He thought about the cottage in the village, the rocking chair on the porch, the quiet days of retirement. And then he thought about the woman who had almost jumped, and the ship's crew saved from the storm, and the countless others he'd helped without knowing. He thought about how it had felt to light the lamp each evening, the sense of purpose that had filled him, the knowledge that he was doing something that mattered. If I stay, he said slowly, I would be comfortable, I would rest, but I would also be finished. Complete, maybe, but finished. Yes, the stars agreed. And if I go with you, I would be beginning again, starting over, in a way. Yes, learning new things, serving in new ways. Yes. Elias smiled and felt something like joy beginning to bloom in his chest. I've never been very good at sitting still, he said. Sarah used to tease me about it, said I'd make a terrible retired person. The stars seemed to laugh, their light shimmering with amusement. When would I leave? Elias asked. If I choose to go with you? At dawn, the golden star said. When your successor lights the lamp for his first night, your transformation will be complete. You will rise with the morning sun, and by tomorrow evening, you will take your place in the sky. There will be one more star in the heavens, and the world will be brighter for it. Elias took a deep breath, and in that moment, he felt more certain than he had about anything in his entire life. I accept, he said firmly. I want to continue. I want to keep the light burning, just on a larger scale. Then it is done, the stars said, and their light blazed so brightly that the lamp room was flooded with radiance. Elias Thorne, keeper of the lighthouse at the edge of forever, you are now keeper-elect of the star at the northern gate. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, you rise. After the stars gave their blessing, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they settled into a gentle orbit around the lamp room, their light mingling with the beam of the lighthouse, and the night became something extraordinary, a weaving of earthly and cosmic illumination, all different types of light speaking to each other in a language beyond words. Elias sat in his chair and watched through the windows as the hours passed. Midnight came and went. The fishing boats returned to harbour, their own small lights bobbing on the dark water. A cruise ship passed in the distance, its windows glowing like a city set adrift. The moon rose, waxing gibbous, adding her silver to the symphony of light. And through it all, the stars kept him company, sharing stories of their own posts in the great darkness. One star told him about guiding a fleet of generation ships through a particularly treacherous nebula, keeping them on course for 70 human years as thousands of souls slept in cryogenic suspension, trusting that something would watch over them. Another star spoke of marking the boundary of a black hole, warning away unwary travelers who might stray too close to that ultimate darkness. A third described keeping vigil over a young planet where life was just beginning to emerge, providing the exact wavelength of light needed for the first primitive plants to develop. It's all the same work, Elias marveled, just different scales. All of us keeping lights in the darkness, making sure nobody gets lost. Now you understand, the stars said. Now you see the great pattern. Every consciousness that chooses to serve rather than to take, to illuminate rather than to obscure, to stay present rather than to flee. Every such consciousness is part of the same ancient work, the work of pushing back against entropy, against chaos, against the cold indifference of the universe. It is the work of choosing meaning over meaninglessness, hope over despair, light over darkness. As the night deepened toward its darkest hour, that moment around 3 a.m., when even the most stubborn insomniacs finally sleep, Elias felt a curious sensation. His body, which had been growing heavier and more painful over recent years, began to feel lighter. Not lighter in weight, exactly, but lighter in density. As if he was becoming less solid, more translucent. He looked down at his hands and saw that they were beginning to glow, very faintly, with the same quality of light as the stars around him. "It's starting," he whispered, more in wonder than in fear. "Yes," the golden star confirmed. "The transformation takes time. By dawn, you will be ready to rise." "Will it hurt?" Elias asked, and was surprised to find that he didn't much care either way. He was ready for whatever came. "No," the star assured him. "It feels like taking off a coat you've worn for a very long time, like setting down a heavy bag, like stretching after a long journey. There may be a moment of disorientation, but not pain. Never pain." Elias nodded and returned his gaze to the window. The eastern horizon was beginning to show the faintest hint of grey, the first whisper of dawn, still an hour or more away, but coming. "I should probably write a note," he said suddenly, "for Christopher, to explain, though I don't know how to explain this." "No note is necessary," the stars said gently. "He will find the lamp room empty, the light still burning, and he will assume you left early for the cottage. By the time anyone questions your absence, you will be too far away to call back. Eventually, you will become a legend, the lighthouse keeper who vanished on his last night, leaving nothing but a burning lamp and a sense of mystery. Some will say you walked into the sea. Others will say you simply wandered off into the hills. But a few, the ones who really knew you, will look up at the stars and wonder." Elias smiled at that. "I like being a mystery." The glow in his hands was spreading now, moving up his arms, suffusing his chest. He could see it through his shirt, a soft radiance like moonlight on water. It didn't hurt at all. If anything, it felt like relief, like joints that no longer ached, like lungs that could breathe deeply again, like a heart that could beat without effort. "Will I be able to see this lighthouse from up there?" he asked. From my new post, you will be able to see every lighthouse, the stars told him. Every beacon, every candle, every flashlight, every firefly, every match struck in darkness. You will see all the light in all the worlds, and you will know your brethren. We are legion, Elias. We are numberless, and we are all connected, one vast network of consciousnesses choosing to illuminate rather than to hide. The glow had reached his face now, and when Elias looked at his reflection in the dark glass, he saw that his eyes were shining like lanterns, bright and steady. He looked younger somehow, even as his body was becoming something other than body. 4 a.m. came. The fishing boats would be waking soon, preparing for the early tide. The baker in the village would be lighting his ovens. The world was preparing for another day, as it always did, as it always would, with or without Elias Thorne. But it wouldn't be without his light. That was the thing. That was the beautiful thing. His light would continue, just in a different place, serving a different role in the same eternal work. I'm not afraid, Elias said, surprised by the realization. I thought I would be, but I'm not. Why would you be afraid of becoming more yourself? The golden star asked gently. You have been Lightkeeper in your soul since before you were born. We are not changing you into something foreign. We are simply allowing you to express what you already are, more fully. 5 a.m. The darkness was definitely retreating now, the eastern horizon showing bands of deep blue and purple. Stars, the normal, distant stars, were beginning to fade in the growing light, but the stars in the lamp room remained bright, waiting. Elias stood and walked one more time around his lamp room, touching the brass fittings he'd polished so many times, the stone walls he'd known so well, the windows he'd looked through for 50 years. He was saying goodbye, but it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like gratitude, like honoring what had been before moving into what would be. Thank you, he said to the lighthouse itself. Thank you for giving me purpose. Thank you for giving me a place to pour my faithfulness. Thank you for making me a keeper of light. The lighthouse didn't answer, of course, but Elias felt as if it understood. 5:30. The grey was becoming gold now, the sun preparing to make its entrance. Elias's body was almost entirely transformed, glowing from within, barely solid anymore. He could feel himself wanting to rise, to float, to ascend. It was taking effort to keep his feet on the ground. Soon, the stars told him, very soon now. And then, at precisely 6:17 in the morning, as the first ray of true sunlight broke over the horizon and touched the lighthouse, Elias felt the final tether release. His feet left the ground. Not dramatically, not with a rush or a surge, but gently, peacefully, like a leaf lifting on a breeze. He rose slowly through the lamp room, passing through the ceiling as if it were made of mist, and emerged into the open air above the lighthouse. For a moment, he hovered there, suspended between earth and sky, and looked down at his lighthouse one last time. The beam was still rotating faithfully below him, sweeping across the water, fulfilling its purpose, even as its keeper departed. Young Christopher would arrive in a few hours and would continue the work. The light would not fail. It would never fail. Goodbye, Elias whispered to the world below. Goodbye, and thank you. Then he looked up, and the stars were waiting for him, forming a pathway of light that stretched up and up and up, beyond the clouds, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the blue sky, into the deep black of space itself. "Come," they said, "your post awaits." And Elias Thorne, 73-year-old keeper of the lighthouse at the edge of forever, rose into the sky like a prayer, like a hope, like a promise kept. He rose past the clouds, past the thin air, past the point where Earth's grip could hold him. He rose past the moon, past the orbits of satellites and space debris, past the boundary where earthly and cosmic truly diverged. And as he rose, he changed. His human form dissolved completely, and he became light itself, pure, radiant, eternal light. He became a star. The other stars guided him to his place in the firmament, a position in the northern sky where no star had burned before. It was a strategic position, they explained, overlooking a particular fold in space-time, where ships from 3 different dimensions often got confused, where the cosmic currents were tricky, where a steady, guiding light was desperately needed. "This is your lighthouse now," the golden star told him. And Elias, though he was no longer Elias, no longer human, no longer bound by the limitations of flesh and time, understood perfectly what that meant. He ignited. His new light blazed forth across the darkness, steady and strong and true, and immediately he felt what the stars had promised. He could sense every other light in existence, billions upon billions of them, from the greatest suns to the smallest fireflies, all connected in a vast web of illumination. And he was part of it now. He belonged to it. He was home. Far below, on Earth, in the village near the lighthouse, a young boy woke early and looked out his window at the dawn sky. He noticed something he'd never seen before, a new star, bright and steady, in the northern sky. "Mom," he called out, pointing, "there's a new star." His mother came to the window and looked where he was pointing. She saw it too, impossible to miss, really. A star where no star had been before. "That's strange," she murmured. "I don't remember that star being there last night." But the boy smiled, as if he knew something she didn't. "Maybe it's the lighthouse keeper," he said. "Maybe he became a star." His mother laughed and ruffled his hair. "That's silly. People don't become stars." "Maybe they do," the boy said, still looking up. "Maybe the really good ones do." Christopher arrived at the lighthouse at the edge of forever at 9 o'clock that morning, carrying his bag of belongings and a heart full of nervous excitement. He was 24 years old, fresh from the Maritime Academy, eager to prove himself worthy of this prestigious post. He climbed the 173 steps, counting each one, and reached the lamp room to find it empty. The lamp had burned itself out sometime around dawn. The oil reservoir was empty, but there was no sign of Elias Thorne. "Mr. Thorne," Christopher called out, looking around the circular room. "Sir, it's Christopher Hayes, your replacement." No answer, just the sound of wind and waves and gulls crying in the distance. Christopher searched the lighthouse from top to bottom, then checked the keeper's cottage, then walked the cliff paths, calling for the old keeper. By noon, he was concerned enough to contact the Maritime Authority. "He's just gone," Christopher reported over the wireless. "The lamp burned all night. I can tell from the oil level, but there's no sign of him. It's like he just vanished." The Maritime Authority sent a search party. They combed the cliffs, checked the beaches, questioned the villagers. No one had seen Elias Thorne since the previous evening, when the baker had noticed him walking up to the lighthouse with his oil can as usual. "He probably went for a walk and fell," one searcher suggested. "These cliffs are treacherous." "Or went into the sea," another said. Old lighthouse keepers sometimes do that. Can't bear to retire, so they choose the ocean instead. But nobody was ever found. After a week of searching, Elias Thorne was declared missing, presumed dead. A small memorial service was held in the village church, attended by the fishermen and their families, by the Maritime Authority officials, and by young Christopher, who felt somehow responsible, even though he knew he wasn't. He was the best of us, said Captain Jensen, an old fisherman who'd known Elias for 40 years. Never missed a night, never failed. When you saw that light, you knew someone was watching. Someone cared. That's worth more than gold. Christopher took up his post that evening, lighting the lamp for the first time with hands that shook slightly. He felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not just to maintain the lamp, but to live up to the legend of Elias Thorne. As the sun set and the beam began its rotation, Christopher sat in the old wooden chair and looked out at the darkening sea. And then he looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear. There was one star in the northern sky, bright and golden, that he didn't remember from his astronomy classes. It was positioned perfectly, directly in line with the lighthouse beam, and as his lamp rotated, it seemed to Christopher that his light reached up to touch that star, and the star's light reached down to touch his lamp. "Mr. Thorne," Christopher whispered, feeling foolish but unable to stop himself. "Is that you?" The star pulsed once, twice, 3 times, though that might have been atmospheric distortion, or his imagination, or just the way starlight flickers when you stare at it too long. But Christopher chose to believe it was a response. And from that night forward, he always felt as if he wasn't alone in the lamp room, as if someone was watching over him the way he watched over the ships, as if there was a chain of light keepers stretching from earth to heaven, all of them connected, all of them faithful. Years passed. Christopher became an excellent keeper in his own right, serving for 32 years before his own retirement. He trained his own replacement, a young woman named Anna, who approached the work with the same dedication he'd learned from the legend of Elias Thorne. And Anna trained someone after her, and that keeper trained another, and the chain continued generation after generation, each one looking up at that particular bright star in the northern sky and feeling connected to something larger than themselves. The lighthouse at the edge of forever kept burning, night after night, year after year, decade after decade. Keepers came and went, but the light remained constant. And in the sky above, the star that had once been Elias Thorne burned just as faithfully, guiding its own ships through its own darkness, keeping its own vigil. Sometimes, on particularly clear nights, the fishermen in the village would look up at that star and tell stories. Stories of the keeper who vanished on his last night, who loved his lighthouse so much he couldn't bear to leave, who became a star so he could keep watching over them forever. That's just superstition, the practical ones would say. Stars don't work that way. But the romantic ones, the poets and the dreamers and the children, they knew better. They knew that the universe was stranger and more wonderful than any textbook could explain. They knew that love and faithfulness and dedication could transform a person into something eternal. They knew that the best of us don't die. We just change forms, moving on to new posts, new responsibilities, new ways of serving the light. Elias adjusted to his new existence with the same methodical patience he'd brought to lighthouse keeping. Being a star, he discovered, was not so different from being a lighthouse keeper. It just operated on a different scale and with different rules. Instead of trimming wicks and filling oil reservoirs, he maintained his fusion core, balancing the forces of gravity and nuclear fire in a delicate dance that had to be kept stable for eons. Instead of rotating a lens, he modulated his light across different wavelengths, each frequency serving a different purpose. One to guide the dimensional ships, another to warm nearby planets, a third to communicate with the other stars in the network. And instead of watching for ships on the ocean, he watched for consciousness, traveling through the void, souls in transition, beings on journeys, travelers of all kinds who needed help finding their way. His first save came 3 months after his transformation. A small scout ship, organic in nature, something like a living creature bred for space travel, had become disoriented in the dimensional fold near his position. It was carrying 17 passengers, members of a species Elias had never encountered before, beings who lived primarily as energy patterns but needed physical vessels for certain types of travel. They were lost, panicking, their distress calls radiating out across multiple dimensions at once. Elias responded instinctively, the same way he'd always responded to distress. He intensified his light in their direction, modulating it to create a clear path through the dimensional fold, marking the safe passage with pulses that said simply, "This way, follow this way. You're not alone." The ship corrected course, following his light, and emerged safely on the other side of the fold. Before jumping to their next destination, they sent a message back, not in words, but in pure gratitude, a burst of emotion that Elias felt in his core. "Thank you," they said. "Thank you for watching. Thank you for being there." And Elias felt the same thing he'd always felt when he knew his light had helped someone. Purpose, fulfillment, the deep satisfaction of knowing he was doing what he was meant to do. The other stars congratulated him on his first save, their lights pulsing in approval across the vast distances that separated them. "You're a natural," the golden star told him. "We knew you would be." As time passed, and oh, how differently time passed when you were eternal, Elias began to understand the great pattern the stars had spoken of. He began to see how everything was connected, how every act of faithfulness rippled outward in ways both subtle and profound. He watched Earth rotating below him, saw the lighthouse that had been his home still burning faithfully, night after night. He saw Christopher become an old man, saw Anna take over the lamp, saw generation after generation of keepers maintaining the light. And he felt proud, deeply proud, knowing that he'd started a legacy that continued without him. But he also saw other things. He saw wars breaking out, saw darkness spreading in human hearts, saw people choosing fear over love, destruction over creation. And in those moments, he understood viscerally what the stars had meant about the fight against entropy and chaos. Every light mattered because darkness was always pressing in. Every faithful presence mattered because abandonment was always the easier choice. Every choice to illuminate rather than obscure mattered because the universe had no inherent meaning. Meaning was what consciousness created, moment by moment, choice by choice. Elias saw souls being born and souls dying, saw the great cycle of existence turning like a cosmic wheel. And sometimes, very rarely, he saw other souls rising as he had risen. other faithful light keepers finishing their earthly posts and ascending to take their places among the stars. Each time it happened, the entire network of stars would pulse in welcome, acknowledging the new addition to their ranks. And Elias would pulse too, remembering his own transformation, feeling a kinship with these new arrivals who were just beginning to understand the scope of their new work. One day, though day was a strange concept when you existed outside normal time, a soul rose from earth that Elias recognized immediately, even before she'd fully transformed. Sarah, his beloved Sarah, who had lived another 43 years after his departure, who had mourned him and missed him, but had also found joy in her remaining years, who had taught school children and tended gardens and told stories about her husband, the lighthouse keeper, who had vanished mysteriously on his last night. She rose into the sky as he had risen, her human form dissolving into light, and the stars guided her to a position not far from Elias, close enough that their lights could touch, could mingle, could dance together across the darkness. Elias, she said, or thought, or somehow communicated in the way that stars communicate. Is that really you? It's me, he replied, his light pulsing with joy so intense it momentarily brightened every planet in his vicinity. I've been waiting for you. I knew you'd come. You became a star, she said, wonder and amusement mixing in her communication. You couldn't even retire like a normal person. You had to go and become a star. I couldn't help it, Elias said, and there was laughter in his light. I'm not good at sitting still, remember? I remember everything, Sarah said, and her light reached out and intertwined with his, and they blazed together like binary stars, two lights that had always been meant to shine as one. For a time, a long time, measured in human years, though it felt like moments to them. They simply enjoyed being together again, sharing their experiences, catching up on everything that had happened since Elias's transformation. Sarah told him about the life she'd lived after he left, the children she'd taught, the gardens she'd tended, the quiet contentment she'd found even in his absence. And Elias told her about his work as a star, about the ships he'd guided and the souls he'd helped, and the great pattern he'd begun to understand. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked him, choosing this instead of those last years together on earth? Every day, Elias admitted, and also never. I missed you with an ache that never stopped, but I knew I was where I needed to be, doing what I was meant to do, and I knew that if there was any justice in the universe, we'd find each other again. And here we are, Sarah said softly. Together again, but different. Better, maybe. Better, Elias agreed. Because now we get to do this forever. Now we get to keep each other's light burning for as long as we choose. They settled into their new existence as partners, two stars working in tandem, covering a larger area of space, guiding more ships, helping more travelers. They developed a rhythm, a dance of light that was uniquely theirs, and the other stars watched and approved and remembered what it was like to be newly reunited with beloved souls. Centuries passed, millennia. The earth below changed dramatically. Civilizations rose and fell. Technologies advanced beyond anything Elias or Sarah could have imagined during their human years. Humanity spread out among the stars themselves, encountering other species, joining the great cosmic community. The lighthouse at the edge of forever eventually became obsolete. Ships no longer needed physical beacons when they had GPS and radar and quantum navigation systems. The lighthouse was decommissioned, turned into a museum, then eventually abandoned as the climate changed and the seas rose and the coastline shifted. But even after the physical lighthouse crumbled and fell into the sea, the star that had been Elias Thorne kept burning, faithful as ever, serving travelers who sailed routes his human self could never have imagined. And beside him always burned the star that had been Sarah, his partner in light, his companion in the darkness, his proof that love transcends form and function and time itself. Billions of years passed, though Elias and Sarah experienced time so differently that billions of years felt more like a long, satisfying career than an incomprehensible eternity. They worked, they guided, they saved countless lives and helped innumerable souls find their way through the darkness. But eventually, as the stars had told Elias on that last night in the lighthouse, they began to feel something new. Completion. Not exhaustion, exactly. Not boredom, certainly. There was always new work to do, new travelers to help, new wonders to witness. But there was a sense of having done what they'd set out to do, of having served their time, of being ready for something else. "Do you feel it?" Sarah asked one day, her light pulsing with gentle curiosity. That sense of being ready to move on. "I do," Elias confirmed. "I've been feeling it for a while now, like we've completed this chapter and it's time to turn the page." "What comes next?" Sarah wondered. The other stars don't talk much about what happens when stars choose to stop being stars. So they asked. They reached out across the vast network of lights and posed their question to the oldest stars, the ones who had been burning since the early days of the universe, the ancient light keepers who had seen everything. "What comes next," the ancient stars replied, "is whatever you choose. You can remain as stars forever if you wish. You can transform into something else. Black holes, nebulae, planets, comets. You can return to physical form, be born again into a new life with new lessons to learn. You can merge with the cosmic consciousness and become part of the fundamental fabric of reality itself. The options are limitless because you have earned your freedom through your service." "And if we wanted to return to Earth?" Elias asked, surprising himself with the question. "If we wanted to be human again?" "Then you would be born again as humans," the stars said simply. "Though not as yourselves, you would be new people with new names, new lives, new experiences. You would not remember being stars, at least not consciously. But the wisdom you've gained, the love you've cultivated, the faithfulness you've practiced, all of that would be woven into your new souls, informing who you became." Elias and Sarah considered this in silence for a long time, their lights pulsing thoughtfully. "I miss having hands," Sarah admitted finally. "I miss touching things. I miss the smell of bread baking and the feel of soil in a garden and the weight of a physical body. I miss being small and limited and mortal. I miss the lighthouse," Elias said quietly. "I miss climbing those stairs. I miss the mechanical simplicity of maintaining a lamp. I miss watching the sunrise from the lamp room, knowing I'd kept watch through another night." "We could go back," Sarah said. "Not as ourselves, but as someone new. We could find each other again, fall in love again, choose each other again." "Would we recognize each other?" Elias asked. "Without memories, without knowing who we'd been?" "I think so," Sarah said with certainty. "I think love recognizes itself, even without memory. I think we'd find each other somehow. We always do." And so, they made their choice. They would return to Earth, be born again as humans, live mortal lives once more. They would forget being stars, forget the eons of service, forget everything except the deepest essence of who they were. Light keepers, faithful souls, partners in illumination. Thank you, they said to the other stars. Thank you for welcoming us, for teaching us, for letting us serve alongside you. Thank you, the stars replied, for being faithful, for showing up, for keeping your light burning even when it was hard, even when no one noticed, even when you thought it didn't matter. You have been exemplary light keepers, and the universe is brighter because you existed. The transformation from star to human was slower than the transformation from human to star had been. It took time for beings of pure light to condense back into matter, to take on the limitations of flesh, to compress themselves into the tiny, fragile vessels of human bodies. But eventually, in a hospital in a coastal town not far from where the old lighthouse had once stood, 2 babies were born on the same night. A boy and a girl, unrelated, born to different families, with no apparent connection between them. But if anyone had been watching carefully, if anyone had been paying attention to the subtleties of soul and spirit, they might have noticed that both babies seemed to carry light in their eyes, a certain quality of steady radiance that had nothing to do with physical brightness. And if anyone had looked up at the sky that night, they might have noticed 2 stars, 2 bright stars that had burned faithfully in the northern sky for billions of years, suddenly go dark, their light finally, peacefully, going out. 25 years later, a young woman named Elena took a job as curator of the Lighthouse Museum at the edge of forever. The lighthouse had been restored and reopened as a historical site after someone had donated a large sum of money specifically for its preservation, claiming that it was important to remember the keepers who had served there. Elena loved the job immediately. She loved climbing the 173 steps, loved learning about the history of lighthouse keeping, loved meeting the visitors who came to see where the legendary Elias Thorne had disappeared mysteriously on his last night. But more than anything, she loved the evening hours when the museum closed and she was alone in the lamp room, watching the sunset over the ocean. The lamp itself didn't burn anymore. It was just for show now, with electric lights for tourists to photograph. But Elena always felt as if something was still lit, some invisible beacon still calling out across the water. One evening in September, as Elena was closing up for the day, a young man climbed the steps and knocked on the lamp room door. "I'm sorry," Elena called out. "We're closed. Museum hours are 9 to 5. "I know," the young man said. I've always wanted to see this place at sunset. I'm Thomas, by the way. I'm a graduate student studying maritime history. Is there any chance I could just look for a few minutes? I've come a long way." Elena hesitated, then saw something in the young man's face, a quality of earnestness, of genuine reverence for this place, that made her nod. "All right, just for a few minutes." Thomas stepped into the lamp room and immediately walked to the western window, looking out at the sunset exactly as Elena had been doing. They stood side by side in comfortable silence, watching the sun descend toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber and rose. "It's beautiful," Thomas said quietly. "No wonder Elias Thorne couldn't leave." "You know the story?" Eleanor asked. "Everyone knows the story," Thomas said. "The keeper who vanished on his last night. Some people say he walked into the sea. Some say he just wandered off and died on the cliffs. But I always liked the other explanation." "What other explanation?" Thomas smiled, almost embarrassed. "The one where he became a star. I know it's just a story, just something people made up to explain an unexplained disappearance. But I always thought it was beautiful. The idea that someone who kept the light burning faithfully for so long would become a light himself. Elena felt something stir in her chest, a strange recognition she couldn't quite name. "I like that explanation too," she said softly. "Actually, I love it. It feels true somehow. Not factually true, maybe, but true in a deeper way." "Exactly," Thomas said, and he turned to look at her directly for the first time. Their eyes met, and both of them felt it. That shock of recognition, that sense of having known each other before, though they'd never met. "Have we—" Elena started. "I don't think so," Thomas said, "but I feel like I've been looking for you, like I'd know you anywhere." They stood in the lamp room as the sun set completely and the first stars began to appear. Neither of them moved to turn on the lights. They just stayed there in the gentle darkness, talking, finding that they fit together in ways that surprised and delighted them both. Thomas told her about his research into lighthouse keeping, his fascination with the keepers who'd served in isolation, the ones who'd stayed faithful to their posts even when it was lonely, even when no one noticed. Elena told him about her love for this particular lighthouse, how she'd been drawn to it from the first moment she'd seen it, how she'd taken the curator job even though it paid less than other positions she'd been offered, simply because being here felt right. "It's like coming home," she said. "Even though I'd never been here before I applied for the job, it feels like coming home." "I know exactly what you mean," Thomas said. "I felt the same way the first time I visited, like I'd been here before, in some other life." They both laughed at that, but the laughter was gentle, not dismissive, because both of them, in that moment, half believed it might be true. As the night deepened, Thomas reluctantly said he should go. He was staying in the village and had a long drive back to the university the next day. But before he left, he asked, Could I come back? Maybe take you to dinner? I'd love to hear more about your work here." "I'd like that," Elena said, and felt warmth spreading through her chest. "I'd like that very much." Thomas left, but turned back at the top of the stairs. "Elena, look up at the northern sky tonight. There's a star there. Well, there used to be 2 stars there, actually. Binary stars, very bright, but they went dark about 25 years ago, which is strange because stars don't usually just go dark like that. Anyway, I always thought of them as Elias and Sarah, the keeper and his wife. Probably silly, but it's not silly," Elena interrupted. "It's beautiful." After Thomas left, Elena did look up at the northern sky. She couldn't see the stars he'd mentioned, of course. They were gone, as he'd said. But she felt something, standing there in the lamp room, looking up at the place where they'd been. It felt like gratitude, like acknowledgement, like a circle completing. That night, sleeping in her small apartment in the village, Elena dreamed of being a star, of burning faithfully for billions of years, of guiding ships through dimensional folds, of watching over the universe with patient, eternal love. And in her dream, another star burned beside her, its light intertwined with hers, and she knew that they had been partners in this work forever, across time and space and form. When she woke, the dream faded, as dreams do. But the feeling remained, the certainty that she had loved Thomas before, would love him again, had been loving him always. Elena and Thomas fell in love, as they were always going to fall in love. They married 2 years later, holding their wedding at the lighthouse at sunset, with the lamp room full of friends and family, and the ocean spread out below them like a promise. Elena's father, giving a toast at the reception, joked that his daughter had married a man who loved old lighthouses as much as she did. so at least they'd never fight about vacation destinations. Everyone laughed, but Elena and Thomas looked at each other and both thought the same thing. This is more than coincidence. This is something deeper. They made their life in the village, both working to preserve and share the history of the lighthouse. Thomas finished his graduate degree with a dissertation on lighthouse keepers of the late 19th century, featuring Elias Thorne prominently. Elena continued as curator, expanding the museum, adding new exhibits, making sure the story of the lighthouse and its keepers was told fully and with respect. And every evening, weather permitting, they climbed the 173 steps together and watched the sunset from the lamp room, standing in the same spot where Elias Thorne had stood on his last night, looking out at the same ocean, feeling connected to something larger than themselves. "Do you ever wonder," Elena asked one evening, "what really happened to him, to Elias?" "I used to wonder," Thomas admitted. "But I think I've made my peace with not knowing. The mystery is part of it, isn't it? The not knowing. The space where we can imagine all kinds of beautiful possibilities." "Like him becoming a star," Elena said with a smile. "Like him becoming a star," Thomas agreed. "And then, billions of years later, choosing to come back, choosing to be human again, to be small and limited and mortal again, because there's something sacred in that too, something worth experiencing." Elena leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body beside hers. "If that were true," she said quietly, "if we really had been stars who chose to return, why would we do it? What would make eternal beings want to be temporary again?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Maybe," he said finally, "because being eternal means you never have to choose. You never have to prioritize. Every moment is like every other moment when you have infinite moments. But being mortal means every moment matters. Every choice is precious because you can't make infinite choices. Every person you love is precious because you can't love them forever, at least not in physical form. So mortality is what gives meaning to love," Elena said, understanding. "Maybe," Thomas said. "Or maybe love is what gives meaning to mortality. Maybe they need each other." They stood in silence as the sun touched the horizon, and in that moment, both of them felt something shift, a veil lifting, a memory surfacing, though not quite breaking into consciousness. They both felt, without quite knowing why, that they had stood together like this before, in some other form, in some other time, that they had been partners in important work, that they had been faithful to each other and to something larger than themselves. And they both felt, with absolute certainty, that they would be together again, in some form, in some future they couldn't yet imagine. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The first stars appeared, and Eleanor and Thomas, hand in hand, felt gratitude for this moment, this life, this love, all the more precious because it was temporary, all the more meaningful because it would end. "Should we light a candle?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "I know the actual lamp doesn't work anymore, but we could light a candle up here, keep the tradition alive, in a small way." "I'd like that," Thomas said. So Eleanor retrieved a candle from the museum's supply closet, and together they lit it, placing it in the center of the lamp room. It was such a small light compared to the great Fresnel lens that had once burned here. But it was light nonetheless, pushing back against darkness, making a statement about human intention and care. To the keepers, Elena said softly, looking at the candle flame. To everyone who has ever kept a light burning, who has stayed faithful to their post, who has chosen to illuminate rather than obscure, to the keepers, Thomas echoed, wherever they are now, whatever they've become. The candle burned steadily, its small flame dancing in the draughts of the lamp room. And around the world, in that same moment, other lights were being lit. Lighthouses and lanterns, candles and campfires, billions of electric lights in billions of homes. People everywhere choosing illumination, creating brightness, pushing back against the dark, and high above. Though Eleanor and Thomas couldn't see them in the twilight, the stars were appearing one by one, those ancient and eternal light keepers, still at their posts, still faithful, still calling out across the darkness, "You are not alone. We are watching. There is a way home." Some of those stars had once been human. Some had been other things. But all of them had chosen service over comfort, faithfulness over ease, illumination over obscurity. All of them were part of the great chain of light keepers stretching from the beginning of consciousness to its end, whenever and however that might come. Elena and Thomas didn't know they had once been among those stars. They didn't remember their billions of years of service, their partnership in the cosmic dark. But they didn't need to remember to continue the work. The work was encoded in their souls, deeper than memory, more fundamental than conscious thought. They were light keepers. They had always been light keepers. They would always be light keepers, in whatever form they took, for as long as darkness existed and needed to be met with faithful illumination. And that was enough. That was everything. And so our story ends where all good stories end, with the understanding that nothing truly ends. Everything transforms. Everything continues. Everything becomes something new while remaining essentially itself. Elias and Sarah are still keeping light in their new forms, in their new lives. The stars they once were have been replaced by new stars, new souls stepping into service. The lighthouse they loved has been preserved and honored. The work continues, as it always does, as it always will. And you, dear listener, lying here in the darkness of your room, breathing slowly, feeling your body growing heavier and more relaxed with each word, you are part of this story too. Because every time you choose kindness over cruelty, you are keeping a light. Every time you show up when you said you would, you are keeping a light. Every time you offer comfort to someone in darkness, you are keeping a light. You don't need to be a star or a lighthouse keeper or anything grand or cosmic. You just need to be faithful to the small lights you've been given to tend. The light of your presence, the light of your attention, the light of your care. That is enough. That has always been enough. Let your eyes remain closed now. Feel the weight of your body sinking deeper into the surface beneath you. Your breathing is slow and steady, like waves on a shore. In and out, in and out. Imagine yourself in the lamp room of that lighthouse, sitting in the old wooden chair, watching your own small light burning faithfully. You are safe here. You are exactly where you need to be. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. The light rotates slowly, one sweep across the darkness. Rest, another sweep. Peace, another sweep. Sleep. Your job for tonight is complete. You have shown up. You have been present. You have kept your light burning through another day. Now you can rest. Now you can let go. Now you can drift into the soft darkness of sleep, knowing that other lights are keeping watch while you rest. The stars are watching. The lighthouse keepers are at their posts. The universe is holding you gently, the way the ocean holds a ship, the way the night sky holds the stars. You are safe. You are loved. You are enough. Let sleep find you now, soft as starlight, gentle as a lighthouse beam, sweeping across calm waters. Breathe in the peace of this moment, and breathe out everything else. Your body is heavy and relaxed. Your mind is quiet and still. Sleep is coming for you like a tide, inevitable and gentle, pulling you down into deep rest, into dreams, into the darkness that heals and restores. Let go now. Let everything go. Float into sleep like a star rising into the sky, effortless and natural and beautiful. Good night from Whispered Peace. May you sleep deeply. May you dream gently. May you wake tomorrow feeling restored, knowing that you are part of something larger, something beautiful, something eternal. The light you carry matters. Your faithfulness matters. You matter. Sleep now. Just sleep. The lighthouse is still standing. The stars are still burning. And you are held in the gentle darkness, safe and loved and complete. Good night.